Hey everybody! So real quick, I just wanted to post a video on the cloning topic. There's not a lot I want to do as far as background information on cloning. I think the reading covers it pretty well. But I wanted to introduce one supplemental bit of thinking on it that might help you in your journaling and also help you reflect more broadly on the possible applications of cloning, because I think that this thing that I'm going to talk about is a much more realistic use of cloning technology that you'll see in your lifetimes. Uh, One thing I wish I had started a class out with is mentioning that if we look at the rate at which technology and biotechnology in particular is advancing, there's a lot of measures that you can use to measure rates of technological progress. Things like amount of computing power per dollar, or wideness of access of particular technologies, or something like that. Um, but by any measure that you have for the rate at which technology is progressing, technology progresses exponentially and not linearly. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, and so on. Uh, so it's on this curve, and we're hitting a point in the curve of technological progress where it's speeding up at a really alarming. Maybe it's not alarming yet, but it's pretty wild, and it's only going to get faster. So you'll notice that, like, within your lifetime, we went from, what, you're 20, so we went from flip phones, or I guess 20 years ago there were beepers, and now we have iPhones. If you see the same, if you imagine the same level of technological progress in biotechnologies, it's wild, and the progress is going to be about the same, maybe a little slower, because there's not the huge commercial infusion of cash for biotechnologies the way there are for iPhones, but the rate at which we're coming out with new technologies and new applications is going to become very noticeable within your lifetime. There are going to be some, 10 years from now, there are going to be medical applications that, if we told you right now, in 10 years you're going to see this, you would think, no fucking way, there's just impossible. That's going to be the way it is, and I can't tell you what those are because we we don't yet know. We have yet to see the breakthroughs happen, but they certainly will. The history and the rates of change seem to clearly suggest it. So all that to say, thinking about applications of cloning technology in your lifetime are really worth considering at a practical level, and not just sci-fi sort of abstract thoughts. We're not just going to be cloning sheep. Um, can I give you an example to like freak you out a little bit about the technological rate of change before we move on to cloning, just to convince you that, like, uh, there is a lot of freakiness coming. Um, so there's one technology called a nanoparticle, which is like basically it's a robot the size of just a couple of atoms, which is not much of a robot, but you can make machines out of things that are just a few atoms, and they can do specific tasks. So there's one sort of nanoparticle that you could make that all it does is it grabs oxygen molecules and holds them to its surface, right? Which is exactly what your blood cells do. Some of your blood cells, anyway, are just oxygen transport machines. But uh, we can make a nanoparticle that would be like way more efficient at holding oxygen than a blood cell would be. And if we replaced just 10% of your blood cells with one of these nanoparticles, You could sit at the bottom of a pool for 4 hours, or you could sprint for 20 minutes without taking a breath. Uh, and that exists at Harvard right now. You can, you yourself can't go get these particles put in you, but they exist and they're in animals. And those, you can have a rat that just sits there and doesn't breathe for 4 straight hours because it's got these little machines in its body. There's a lab at Duke where we have neural circuitry implanted into the small little neurocircuit chips planted into the brains of monkeys that allow them to telepathically control remote control cars and computers and things like that. So the technological applications that are available but not yet available for human use are just bizarre crazy, and you'll get to see these. I mean, I hope I do too. I'm not that much older than you. I hope I don't die yet, but we'll get to see them. So, thinking about some of these things may seem like abstract and sci-fi, but it's super not, because sci-fi is like sci-future. So, so a cloning application that doesn't get much traction or mention in the articles or in the stuff that we read, but that I think is more likely to be useful in the future is this. Not that we clone your kid who died because your kid has some sentimental value to you, and not that we clone you entirely, but that we make a clone of you so that we can grow organs for you that are exactly genetically like your organs. So imagine a scenario like this. I start a company, and it's a cloning company, and for $200,000, you can come and give me your DNA, and I will clone you, and I'll grow a body exactly like your body, and it will be perfectly healthy. So when you get old and your organs start failing, you've drunk your liver into, it's the size of a watermelon, and we got to take it out. We have a liver right here for you, ready to go, brand new. Kidneys, heart, whatever you need, we can create it for you, and not even all that. It doesn't even take all that long, really. We could, in the span of just a few years, have a workable organ that is genetically exactly like yours. But you'd say, well, that's a person, That's how could you ethically do this? Well, my company, I'm proposing, would clone people, but we would genetically alter them just so that they are co- completely brain dead. Their brain stem works to keep their organs working, but there's no consciousness there at all. It is simply a human body with no mind inside it. Nothing is going on inside the brain of this person. Nothing ever went on inside the brain of that body. I shouldn't say person, probably. That'll be highly contested. So that's a proposal. I doubt that particular company will be able to push its way into existence within our legal framework. But there are countries that don't have the sorts of regulations that the U.S. does. There are islands that you can just buy and like set up a lab on it, and if it becomes desirable enough, somebody will do this. Um, so cloning isn't just about creating more people. It can be about creating the the parts of those people, and it's possible to clone just and grow just a particular organ for a person. Though it might be nice to have an entirely new body available for you. Maybe slightly more sci-fi, but not implausible, is a scenario where you get to be 72 years old and you're like, your body's old and shitty, and you want to you wish you were young again. Well, we've cloned a body and it's now like 18, and we've gotten neurosurgery to the point that we could take your brain out and put the brain into this body and encourage all of the neural connections between your brainstem and your spinal cord to fuse in the right way, so that you'd be a 72-year-old brain in a 18-year-old body. That is not that's not like out of the reach of researchers to be working on doing. Um, and there's a lot that goes on in the world that doesn't get splashed across the front pages of the New York Times because it's not happening in a lab controlled by a company that has a PR office that tells the world about it. It's happening in the lab of infinitely wealthy Saudi Arabian prince or something. You know, if you had almost literally infinite money and literally no government that was regulating you, and you started getting old, I bet you'd start thinking about some of these things. So science happens in all sorts of weird ways. What I want to ask you, though, and what I want to encourage you to think about when it comes to your journaling, is not just the question of cloning people to make new people, and sort of in the way that we use IVF to make new babies, but cloning as a way of generating useful body parts or entire useful bodies. Is that moral to do? Is it okay to treat human bodies as reserves for, you know, for future failed organs? If it is it okay no matter what? Or is it only okay if you're treating your current body respectfully? Like, I can imagine somebody saying, well, it's okay if you want to clone a full human body of your own minus a conscious brain. It's okay to do that as long as you're not doing it so that you can, like, drink and do all the heroin you want and then just, like, get a new organ when you need it, because that is in some sense um, treating the human body without dignity. Does the human body itself deserve dignity, or just the human person? Because remember, there are human bodies that aren't people. Dead bodies are human bodies, but they're not people. If you A brain dead person is a human body in every sense of the word, but most people, if they were encouraged to think long enough about it, would probably come to the conclusion that there's not a person in there if the brain isn't doing anything. There's no thoughts in there. There's no possibility of thinking in there. Um, so, what deserves respect? Is it just the human body, or is it the entire human person? And when it comes to the ethics of cloning, where do you think the line should be drawn, and why? What applications do you think are legitimate, morally legitimate applications, and which ones do you think we ought not to mess with? And give a reason for why we ought not to mess with those, and it needs to be a reason that appeals to some sort of moral principle that we all understand, that we all intuitively hold, like, you know, respect for human autonomy, or respect for life, or dignity, or something like that. I'm not giving those examples necessarily of the principle that you need to appeal to. I'm just giving those examples of moral principles that everybody recognizes as valid in some way. This uh, bubbly water is like crazy delicious, and it has 0 calories in it and no sweeteners. It's like way better than LaCroix or whatever. So, personal endorsement to bubbly water. Raspberry flavor. Okay, so work that into your journal. Um, Maybe even, if you want, reflect on this application where we're not cloning human persons, but we're cloning animals. Because we found like a particularly delicious sort of pig, and we're cloning it. Um, is that Does that trouble you? If if that doesn't trouble you, but doing the same thing with a human would trouble you, why? I mean, pigs are smart. Pigs have feelings. Pigs, have friendships with one another. They're pretty like intelligent, sophisticated animals mentally. They just don't have fingers. Pigs would play piano if they had fingers. We just don't. So if something bothers you about doing it with the human but not doing it with the pig, explain to yourself why in your journal. Try to figure out why you care. Is it just because you're a human? That's not a very good reason to say, well, that's wrong because I'm a human. What you are shouldn't have any bearing on what's right or wrong. And there might be beneficent uses of this, right? What if I started cloning pigs that were mentally had mental deficiencies to the point that they couldn't suffer? They're so stupid that they're almost brain dead. They can't suffer at all. They can't feel scared or lonely or all the awful feelings that pigs must feel when they're crammed into these like factory farming operations. What if I said I'm just going to clone a bunch of pigs that are essentially brain dead and feed their bodies, fatten them up, and then we'll slaughter them for the purposes of having less animal suffering in the farming industry? Is that a morally good use of cloning, or is it morally wrong for some reason? The question is, what's the reason for whichever way you lean? So explore. That's we're getting to the point where I want you in your journals to be exploring the reasons why you lean one way or the other on a particular moral issue, and try to make a solid case for that. So yeah, that's 17 minutes. I'm like 2 minutes over what I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do, is throw out this supplemental cloning thought experiment and get you to reflect on it in your journals. If you've already written your journals, I'm super sorry. Go back and amend them with some reflections on this. And that's all you need to do for this week. Be thinking about what project topic you want to do for your final project. And next week, I'm going to put out a guide for what those projects should look like if they're a paper. And if they're not a paper, it's up to you to pitch an idea to me. And if you never pitch an idea to me, I'm just going to assume that you're doing a paper. So unless I hear from you, the guide for a research paper is the thing that you should be doing. And I know there's a lot of anxiety around doing research papers, but you really shouldn't feel super anxious about it. Like, I'm going to talk to you about how to do it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to psych you into writing a research paper. I'm going to try. Yeah. So that's this week. I hope you're all safe and healthy and having a great time out there. I hope you find something fun to do this weekend. Treat yourself. Get a. I don't know what you like to do. Get a fucking candy bar or something. Go find your thing and do it. And forget about all the other stuff for a little while. After you've journaled about the cloning thing. All right. I will post again next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.